Hello and welcome to the Suna podcast, the podcast where we talk to interesting filmmakers about their lives, their work, and their favorite films on Suna. Suna is a European streaming platform based in Berlin, where you can find exclusive festival highlights, but also exciting cinema from a new generation of filmmakers. My name is Julia Schneider, and today I am talking to director Malik Isasis. We talk about Malik's new film ÖTE, his path to film, and about his experience in the film industry. Enjoy the episode. Thank you and welcome for having this interview with us.
Thank you for taking the time to do it. I appreciate it.
Congratulations on ÖTE, your beautiful feature film that truly captures the energy and magic of solo travel. For those who are unfamiliar with the film, could you maybe briefly tell us a little bit about it? What is it about and what is its core theme?
So the film is about a high school teacher who decides to meet up with her friend, who's also a teacher in Armenia. And on her way to Armenia, she decides to just backpack across Turkey to meet her friend. She does like her own solo tour of Turkey. And my co-director and I wanted to focus on having the protagonist be a Black woman because, Black women are mostly invisible in media. And having the story centered around a Black woman is almost revolutionary in terms of like narrative storytelling outside of like the trauma porn that we see in a lot of American films.
Yeah, so actually I brought a quote from a review that the film got. I'm gonna read it once. Maybe we can discuss it then.
Mm-hmm.
So the person reviewing the film wrote, "Whenever I get to experience a film with a Black female lead that is not about being a single mom, dealing with racism, being a social justice warrior, or dealing with trauma, is divine." Did you have this in the back of your head when you wrote this film, like to kind of diversify the Black female experience on screen?
I typically, as a filmmaker, my whole approach is I'm a person of color and I want to see the type of films, I want to see myself in films. So I write for myself. And so that's perspective I take when it's science fiction or rather a road movie like this one. I'm going to put myself in it. I'm going to center myself and some of my experiences, which translates to a lot of people who are like outside of, whiteness. And we all have similar experiences in terms of being, ostracized in these narrative films. Otherized, we're typically otherized in a lot of films. So it's like I have the ability and a platform to make small independent films. So I'm going to use my voice to tell stories that I don't see, that I want to see myself in.
Yeah, and I think that ÖTE is perfectly capable of doing exactly this. It's a beautiful film with Lela, the protagonist. Maybe let's go a bit more into her as a character.
Mm-hmm.
She navigates the complexities of solo travel with grace and curiosity. What inspired you to create her character, and why was it exactly her as on her path of solo traveling, the story you wanted to tell?
So just how we spoke about otherizing, one of the things I didn't want to do was otherize Turkish culture. And a lot of Layla experiences were my own experiences traveling across Turkey. I'd been to Turkey like 5 times and I fell in love with it. And one of the first times I went to Turkey was 10 years ago, well, 11 years ago now at this point. It was 2013 and I had long locks. And, the further I got away from Istanbul, the more exotic I became to like little kids. And, there's a theme in the film where the boys are staring at her just out of curiosity because they don't see like American Black people. And so there's sometimes curiosity in these stares, sometimes there's lust in these stares, and sometimes there's like maybe disgust or you know. But I wanted to capture all of that in the film. And for me, it was important not to otherize Turkish people. So I wanted to keep the story focused just about her experience and just in her, like what she experiences in that narrow, like, you know, because she's a woman and she's often interfaces with men. You know, men are typically, I can generalize and say that we're the same across cultures when we see women, you know. I feel like that came out wrong, but I just really want to humanize not only Layla, but also the people she encountered.
Yeah.
Right. And I know that there are some like really like harsh and traumatizing stories of solo travel for women. But that's not the story I wanted to tell. I wanted to tell the story of a woman who finds community, and that happens too. That's the story I wanted to focus on with, you know, there was possibilities for danger, but, you know, she was adept at traveling and reading people, and she knew how to get out of situations. So I wanted to make sure I told the story in a way that wasn't otherizing someone else, you know.
Yeah, so Leila in general, she seems so self-confident and aware of the situation she puts herself in. She is rested in herself and she always knows what to say, which is incredible. She's such an inspiring character, and she also inspires the people around her. She sparks curiosity, like you mentioned, especially the children. They keep coming back and staring at her, but she finds a way to kind of flip the lens by then taking the picture of the kid and kind of switching the gaze away from her.
Right.
But she also inspires. She inspires Malik, for example. She listens to her and empowers her to pursue her dream. Maybe we can share who Malik is for a second for those who haven't seen the film yet.
Yeah.
She's the Turkish woman she meets on a train who is in the process of getting a divorce from her abusive husband. Right. And who wants to become an actress or go back to acting. So maybe let's take a look also at the other characters while we're already at Malik's point discussing Malik. She encounters a lot of people on her journeys. It's spontaneous encounters, but they are still meaningful. Maybe you can comment a little bit more on that aspect of the film, the people she meets, and then we can go to also her other significant encounter.
Yeah, that a lot of the encounters are like, again, I do a lot of traveling myself. And, you know, your encounter, like, you can have profound connections with people that you'll never see again. And that's fascinating. One time I went on a date, and this woman was leaving the next day. And she didn't really want to go out. I don't even remember how we met. I think we were out dancing. This is when I was in my early 20s. And she was leaving the next day. And we just ended up connecting and just walking around and just having a connection. There was nothing sexual. There was attraction. But nothing sexual happened. But it was just a deep connection that two people shared in that moment. I never saw her again. You know? And to me, there's something interesting about traveling and making connections, deep connections, profound connections, authentic connections, and then going your separate ways. And I think that for me is like, you don't always have to follow up on these things. You know, it's just something, it's like having a great meal at a restaurant that you'll never come again, go visit again. But in the moment, just being in the moment, like appreciating that connection, I think was important for me.
But do you think it's possible, like, do you think you can only have these moments on vacation while traveling? Is that something unique to being away from home?
I think so. I think it's possible not to have these connections at home, but in a place like New York City, people are so busy. it takes so much to like be present. You've been on the trains. Like when people are on trains, they're just kind of like in their own little. Even in Berlin, people are just in their little boxes, reading with their headphones on, and you just kind of want to shut out the world. And I don't think there's a lot of space to do that when you're home. But when you're overseas traveling, one, you're more open, so the possibilities uh, are there to do that because you're open to it. Um, but yeah, I think it's possible anywhere, but I think it happens overseas more often because that's what we're just more open to it, right? We're looking for these experiences.
Yeah. So it's about being open to connect, to truly connect and be present in the moment. In the train scene where Lela meets Malik, she reads her coffee. So she tells her, predicts her that she's running away from the stillness, actually. So this is also an introspective film. It's about the character of Lela herself and what's going on in her. Although she's a very like she's not telling us that much with her like verbally about herself. It's a more subtle way in which she reveals things about herself. So can you tell us a little bit more about how, as a director, you you showed the inner world of Lela to the audience?
Yeah, I think so. I'm a trained clinical therapist, and I think a lot of like when I'm working with either adults or kids, it's like, you know, we don't reveal a lot about ourselves to strangers. You know, like a lot of stuff stays under the surface, and I think in order to make characters more three-dimensional, it's like a person's not going to tell you everything you need to know about who they are. They will show you. You just have to be looking for the clues. And I felt like um, Layla is very because she works with students. She's always open to listening and like observing. She watches a lot of body language. You know, body language is 86% of communication. So she's aware of people's body language, which also is something she used to keep herself safe. And so it was important for me to like have her listen and not be that dumb American who's loud, stereotypically so. But she's in someone else's culture, and it was very important for her to listen and not center herself. And so that's the place that we wanted to start with this character.
Yeah. So the actress
Yes.
who plays her, Iman Artwell Freeman, she delivers an incredible performance as Lela. She brings calmness, positivity, and mindfulness to the character. How was it working with her, and what did she bring to the role?
I think she brought a lot of maturity to the role, and she also solo travels. Like after the film, she went traveling across Europe with a friend. So she had an extended vacation after the film was done. And, you know, she has her own experiences of traveling while Black, you know, good, bad, and indifferent. So I think she had a lot to bring to the character. Whereas this, you know, the script was the bones, you know, she was the meat and the skin and the organs. And you know, the collaboration was like she's bringing her experiences and I'm bringing my experiences, and I think together, giving her the space to find Layla was important.
Yeah, also while speaking about directing, you co-directed the film with Esra Saidam. You also wrote the film together. How did the two of you collaborate on this project, and what did the creative process look like?
We are part of Brooklyn Filmmakers Collective, which is how we met. We met in 2015. And for the longest time, we were looking for something to work on together. Um, and we started like writing out some ideas. And then the pandemic shut the world down. And I had submitted for a grant at some point, and I received a grant. And that's with the grant is how we made the movie. So once we knew we had funds to actually make the film, the idea started to solidify. And so we had worked previously on a short film where she was the producer and I was the cinematographer. And so she knew how much I love Turkey, and she wanted to shoot something in Turkey. I wanted to shoot something in Turkey, and so we came together to create something that we can do where it could be like streamlined, have a very small crew, and we won't have a huge footprint. And so she went to film school. She went to Columbia Film School here, and I'm self-taught. And so generally the collaboration went smoothly. But because I didn't have like institutional ways of thinking about filmmaking, and she was always wanting to go like, we need bigger this, bigger that, like more people to do things. I was like, no, we don't, because I don't have the institutional like indoctrination of like needing to have so many people to do things. So we both learned from each other. She learned that, you don't need as much as you think you need to make things happen. And I learned that sometimes you do need to have that institutional way of doing things, you know. So yeah, that's
Well, that's a very interesting aspect about the production process itself. So, in some way, producing the film was also a journey, one could say.
yes, for sure, because she had to go out. She went home for the summer, which is in Turkey, and she did all the scouting while I was still here because I was working still. So it was like around this time in May of 2022, she went scouting for a couple weeks in Eastern Turkey. I couldn't go obviously because I was working, and so she was able to do all of that and find all those beautiful locations in Turkey. That was her.
So Turkey as a location, that just came together because you had this personal connection of traveling to Turkey, or why was it that you chose this location to send Lela on a journey to?
Well, one of the things, okay, so part of the writing process, the connection to Turkey is Ezra. And she has a film community there in Istanbul and other places. So the idea of the story was Ezra wanted to start in the East. She just wanted, the movie opens, Layla's already in the East. She's already met, I can't think of his name now.
Yusuf?
Yes. So she wanted to start the film in the East where she's just about to meet Yusuf or she's already met Yusuf. And I was like, I think we should start in the West. And she makes her way towards the East because we get to know who she is. We get to know a baseline of who Layla is before she's in this relationship with some person, right? I think it's important to understand how she reacts to the world, her view of the world, and who she is just as an individual before, we get her enmeshed in this drama, this family drama, right? And so a part of the locations came out of the script because she started from here and she's working her way because she's going to Armenia, right? So a lot of the locations was based off that setup of like meeting people along the way. We're getting to know a little bit about who she is before she becomes enmeshed with Yusuf. So yeah, I like, for me, it's like, I was thinking like, I had framed it in my mind as like the Wizard of Oz, like, the cab driver's the scarecrow, and like she meets these three people It's really for the guy on the beach, but he doesn't play, I feel like, a significant role in her development like the other characters. But I kind of thought of it as like Wizard of Oz, like she meets these people along the way. But that's how the locations kind of evolved, is from the script and her needing to like us needing to establish her as an individual, and also establishing Yusuf as an individual. He also needed a baseline. But if we open the movie up with these two already, we don't know who they are, you know?
Yeah.
And when they're interacting with one another, we don't have a sense of what they're like, and like, so I think we needed to establish those things. So
let's talk about Yusuf in a second, and also about the narrative of the film, because you dived into it already.
yeah,
But also about the guy on the beach. I think Alex was his name.
Alex.
He's kind of, I feel like he was also, his function was also in a way to reveal a little bit more about Lela's character, because she also introduces herself to him, and she kind of uses this approach of skipping the small talk, and she just lists all the relevant, or what people think, relevant information about herself. Just like she says, 33, New York City, teacher, just assuming the questions one would ask if they would have the small talk. So we kind of learn a little bit about her background and where she's from. But also there's this situation in which they have I think a very crucial dialogue. They are about to be intimate with each other. They are in the bedroom, and then Alex says, "I've never been with a Black woman before," and she answers, what's this line? It's such an amazing line. I think she says, "Oh, we have the same anatomy as other human women."
Right.
Which also I think reveals something very important. She's aware of the situation she puts herself in, and that's how she deals with racism, the subtle one, the non-subtle one. So it's a very like interesting scene revealing her character, I guess.
Yeah, yeah, it's like all that was very intentional. And yeah, I think you like articulated it very well.
My analysis of the film.
Yes, I mean, like I think you did a really good job of encapsulating, like it does. Everything is intentional in filmmaking, like in storytelling, because you have a limited amount of time to tell these stories. And I think, yeah, that was one of the ways. Like she knew she wanted to sleep with this guy, so there was no need to get deep with him. Like, yo, we both know what this is. You know, it was just an eloquent way of them like, okay, we see each other. This is gonna happen. So there's no need to do all of this dancing. You know.
Yeah, that makes sense. But mirroring that, her connection with Yusuf, the other man she meets on her journey, is much deeper. Yeah. Can you tell us a little bit more about the two of them? Like, who are these two people together? What's their connection? What meaning does it bring to the film?
Oh, well, our connection to Yusuf is sort of like accidental, where she's, you know, a lot of her travel is like impromptu, kind of like, you know, she didn't call a lot of things out in advance. You know, it's like she has a map. She's like, okay, I know there's a bed and breakfast in this area. I'll just go to it. And Yusuf works at his family's bed and breakfast, and they don't have any more rooms. And she just assumed that there would be rooms there, and there wasn't. And he ends up finding space for her to sleep. And the next morning she gets up to leave, and he offers a ride to the bus depot, right? And so I think I don't know if you have questions that are going to follow up, but I don't want to like kind of like anyway. So Yusuf is right now he's separated from his wife, and she's asking for a divorce. And he's so far has refused to sign the papers. So on the morning that he decides to take Lela to the bus depot, he's also dropping off and signing his divorce papers. And he signs them and he leaves the post office, and his wife calls him and is like, "Did you do it?" And she gets really upset, and she's really volatile. You can, you could tell, you can assume that there was a lot of pain in that relationship. And something she says triggers him, and he goes back and retrieves the letter, and he's upset because he doesn't want a divorce, right? And I think he goes back to his car, and he sees Layla waiting on at the bus stop, and a way of coping with how he's feeling. He goes over and starts talking to her, and to make himself feel better. That was, a selfish act that he was doing. He just wanted to not think about what was going on with him. And he asked, can you spend a day? Let's spend a day together. There was no intention of any kind of relationship. He just wanted to forget what was going on with him. And through that, without that pressure of seeking something, naturally something happened for them, because she wasn't expecting anything, he wasn't expecting anything, but they connected on a profound level, just talking and hanging out,
Yeah, so about the people she meets, and especially Yusuf, you commented that he was going through a severe life change, a breakup, divorce. But not only him, also Malik, she was also in the state of transitioning.
Yeah.
At the same time, Layla was the one traveling. She was the one moving, but she seemed to be the only one calm and rested. So how did this aspect of transition also form the narrative of the film?
It's interesting because, some things you get in when you write, sometimes you get into a flow state, and you don't think about the interconnectedness of some things. Those things didn't occur to me until they were there. That's the beauty of creating. Sometimes you're writing, and characters kind of tell you where they want to go and what they need. I know it sounds crazy. I used to think, when I hear actors or writers talk about, oh yeah, the characters was telling me to do, and it's true. You have your own belief how you want this character to be, but if you're being authentic and true to the story and the character and the decisions that they'll make, they may make a different decision than you make, and you have to be okay with it. So some of those things, I didn't even know that they were happening until it all came together. It's like, oh, okay. So that's a happy accident, that a lot of the people, and then you have Yusuf's cousin who wants to leave, right? She wants to travel to a big city and be in the university. And I think her journey was like the cousin. Her journey was more intentional than Malik, who's on a train. I knew Malik was running from her situation, but I didn't quite connect it to also Yusuf being in the same situation, a transitional situation. So again, it's those things just, that repetition, I don't understand how it happened, but it happened. Yeah.
I was wondering the whole time while watching the film for the first time if they end up being the two people getting the divorce. So I was waiting for this crazy plot twist when Layla finds out, oh, he was the abusive husband, but he wasn't in the end. And I think that was also an incredible experience to just understand that other films have built up this perception that there must be some connection between all the characters. They are all connected in some way. There will be this plot twist. But that's not what life is like necessarily. This is not a Hollywood film, right? It's
Right.
Life is not a Hollywood film. That's what I mean. And it gave so much authenticity to the real life experience, because Turkey is a huge country. There's so many people she meets. It's all kind of coincidental in a way.
Yeah.
And it's more the theme that connects them and not they actually being the couple that broke up.
Yeah, it's interesting because enough people assume that after the screenings, they'd be like, oh yeah, were those two? And it's like, no, one's name is Malik and the other one name is Daphne. Like they have
Yeah.
different names.
Yeah.
But it's funny how the brain works. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, and it's just like, some of the things that Ezra and I were like debating is like, and here's the institutional thinking, I think. Like she felt that there needed to be more of a connection. I was like, we're making an art film and this is about a woman traveling, like, and making connections. She You meet people and you keep it moving. Like it's okay. I know in a Hollywood film that you'd want to connect, that you want to hold someone's hand. But I was like, this is our opportunity to do it differently, like this is not that type of film. Um, so yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so we discussed the characters and how they were connected or not connected. Maybe a personal question. You don't have to answer it.
Oh, before you get to the personal question, I'm surprised you didn't bring up Eje, which is the cousin, the young cousin.
Oh, right. Yeah, maybe let's discuss her
Yusuf
a little
cousin.
bit more. Yes,
Yeah.
yes. So she wants to leave, but it's her father, right? Who doesn't want to let her go.
Yeah.
And she's supposed to take over the family business of managing the whole hotel. But she dreams of more, I guess,
Yeah,
for
she
herself.
wants to go to college and be in a big city, like Yusuf.
Right, but Yusuf came back home because something didn't work out. Right?
Yeah, his cafe failed and his marriage failed, so he's back in the hometown. Like,
Yeah, and now
and he hates it. There's a lot of shame around coming back, which is why his friends like, you chose to come back. You chose to be here.
Yeah, he's very unhappy with his situation, but he fights for his cousin.
Yeah.
Tries to help her get her shot. I would say.
Yeah.
Yeah. So also in some way I saw some parallels to Malik also, because they are both young Turkish women who wanted to take their future in their own hands, but there was others getting in their way in partly very abusive ways.
Yeah.
So also here we see a kind of, was this also one of these accidental connections between the two characters that were not intended but just developed while writing?
I think it's both, because I think culturally, like in the States, the more rural areas are more conservative, and we live in a patriarchal society, but in the South you see a lot more of that in conservative cultures where men dominate all spheres of life. And so in this rural area, where it's mostly like, you see a lot of that. I didn't want to otherize Turkish culture, but I also didn't want to like glorify it either, So it was finding this balance, like being very aware of like how the patriarchy works sometimes, like, and it's not just, Turkish culture. Like we have patriarchy all in the West, actually.
Yes.
And so, yeah, I thought it was important to explore that.
Yeah. So would you say this film also has a kind of feminist undertone?
I mean, I think, yeah, I think so. I think the word feminist, I don't have an issue with it, but I think it's such a triggering word for people. Like when they hear it, it's just it's become so politicized and so toxic, because, that's what, people do when they don't like something or movement. They toxify the language around those movements. So when people say feminism, it's like, oh, no. Or racism, oh, no. Like you just can't say anything about it. But yeah, I think so.
Yeah. So let's also maybe dive a little bit more in her character, the character of her cousin. Can you, for those who haven't seen the film, sum up? We touched on this already, but what's the most crucial aspect that she brings into this film?
I think she reveals a lot about Yusuf and his own struggles. And what's it like to be someone out in a small village with dreams, uh, that are bigger than the people in your community, and how those dreams can be threatening. Because unfortunately, sometimes the people in our lives don't want to see us succeed. You know what I mean? And um, and I think that's what Edge is experiencing. She's experiencing her own family holding her back in a way. Because she's not into living in the highlands and taking care of animals, or managing a bed and breakfast. Like, she wants to be an engineer. That's what she wants to do. She wants to be cosmopolitan. And that's threatening to a father who is controlling and, not in a way that, like, that's abusive, but in a way that, that is not healthy. Right?
Would you say that she was kind of showing her frustration over her own situation when meeting Lela? Was she kind of jealous maybe in some way of this other woman being able to?
No, I'm glad
do
you picked
whatever?
on that. I picked up on that. I think so. I think when we were thinking about Edge, we were thinking about two things. She's been the prettiest girl in the village for a long time. And then another girl comes, a woman, and that attention that Layla gets also creates some like who is this? Right? Taking the attention away. Like all the men in the village that we see are kind of spirited away by Layla, right? Because she's different. She's also, everyone's like, why are you traveling by yourself? Because it doesn't happen a lot. And so I think that's part of it. The other part is Layla is doing the thing that she wants to do. And so in their journey, that jealousy becomes admiration. It's really subtle, but it's there.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, that's the part that didn't make it into the film. Was they did have a conversation, like Layla, they were having coffee, and Layla asked her what were you, because her English is, so they were spending a lot of time texting back and forth using translate. It just slowed the movie down way too much. So, but they did have a connection at some point in the movie. But the way that it's cut now, it just happens off screen, where she becomes, she just admires Layla for being able to do what she wants to do.
Yeah.
And
so Layla once again becomes an inspiration for the people she encounters.
yeah.
Yeah.
Because sometimes, when you meet people, they can hold the mirror up and reflect things that, that you want to do and become, or who you are, or who, like, sometimes when you meet people, they can do that for you. They can be threatening that way. It was like, oh, this person's 26, I'm 26, and they're here, and I feel like I'm here, right? And that that can cause you to reflect a little bit. It's not bad or good. It just is, right? We react to those things. I react to those things. I'm on the older side of being a filmmaker, and I know people who are much younger who are working in Hollywood. So sometimes I have feelings about that. It makes me reflect on, why do I feel this way? I have to acknowledge that I feel a certain way. I may feel jealous because I feel like I put in so much work that I should be at this point in my life. And but also it has nothing to do with that person.
Yeah.
Right? That person's journey is different than mine. And so I think that's important when we're meeting strangers, and I think that's the effect that Layla has on Edge.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you mentioned you mentioned before that you are a self-taught filmmaker, and then sometimes you think you reflect on your position as a filmmaker. What led you actually to making films? What was your inspiration and motivation?
I would say My inspiration, I was 15 when I saw Spike Lee's School Days. Have you ever heard of School Days by Spike Lee?
I've
It's
heard
his
of
second
Spike Lee,
film.
but I haven't heard of the film, no,
It's his
unfortunately.
second. It's the second film that he
Mm.
made, and it's about an elite black college in Atlanta. I was 15 when I saw this film, and it was the first time that I'd seen a film with all black cast. Again, outside of the trauma, and it was only about college students. I was so spirited away by this, like, the experience that I had. I was like, what is this? I've obviously seen films on television. I've been to the movies before at that time. I watched a lot of television. There was something very profound about this experience that I had. And I was like, it made me feel a certain way. And I think that was pride. And so I just when I finished the film, I became obsessed with Spike Lee. And I started to collect articles, cut them out, pictures. And I used to keep the scrapbook of Spike Lee. And, I come from a single parent household. And, filmmaking is one of the most expensive art forms in the world. And I didn't know anything about it. All I knew is that I wanted to do it. And so I had this existential crisis where I had this need to tell stories, but not the means nor the knowledge of how to do it, And so that gap caused like this existential crisis. My mom wasn't going to buy me an 8mm camera to shoot stuff like Spielberg or other filmmakers. And so I just kind of had to sit with this longing for a really long time, 16, 17, 18, 19, because I joined the military so I can go to college. So for 4 years, 4 to 6 years, because I didn't really commit to doing it until I was like a junior in college. So for 6 years, I sat with this longing. I wrote in a book. And when I got into college, that's when I started pursuing it. But I decided not to go into film school when I saw how much it costs. And then I had to pay for my own thesis film. I was like, no, I'm just going to get a degree in something and teach myself. And that's what I did. I decided to go to school for social work because somewhere along the way, when I was like a teenager, my mom was killed by the cops. And I had this profound, I keep saying profound, I had this this time where I was just really grieving. And I was stuck. And the social worker completely helped me out of this hole. And I enjoyed the way that he made me feel. Like he expanded my emotional horizon where I can I was like, oh, I don't have to deal with stuff this way. There's so many other options that I can deal with things. I was like, I got to do this. This was also just as important as the art part too, right?
Yeah, that makes sense, yeah.
And so that's how I became a social worker. And while I was in college, I started just going in to teach myself how to make movies. And another part too, why it took so long, because when I first started, a lot of stuff was analog. It was film. Digital was not around. Even in editing, digital was. So it took so much more of an effort to learn. And just when I was like the last year of my senior year, like a lot of stuff started happening. Apple started creating software which you can edit at home. Cameras and technology, digital technology was becoming more accessible. So I started teaching myself. I made a lot of shitty movies, right? Lots of it. And so I closed that gap. That knowledge gap was closing. And my taste, what I saw in my head, that gap was also closing. And so, yeah, that's what I do.
So, is there something that you would change about the film industry to make it more accessible?
Oh, yeah. Like, they come out with statistics every year about like the how many women directors and writers and people of color writers and directors like it needs to be more accessible, like via funding and development. Like there needs to be programs that develop talent. And there isn't, and you know, the thing that I appreciate about Europe and other places around the world is that the state is involved in funding films. You know, like you get grants and they're co-productions. The United States is the only country that doesn't have a co-production because everything is private. And what that does is it continues to raise the level of entrance into filmmaking. Like even just, I mean, we get to the point now where you can make a movie on an iPhone and that's great. So you don't have to have permission to do anything now. Like technology is making it more accessible. However, when it comes to distribution and film festivals, like we need to be in positions of making decisions. Like, yeah, let's make this movie rather than this movie. So there needs to be more development of talent in all aspects, like technical, cinematography, lighting, costume design, art design, directing, all that stuff. Like there needs to be more training and more programs to train people. And then there needs to be in these institutions, it needs to be like, you know, more people who, it needs to be more representative. And then in terms of distribution, there needs to be more like an American audience. I can only speak to the United States. The United States have completely trained the audiences to have short attention spans. They just don't have the patience to sit through a movie like ÖTE. They just don't have the patience. And because there's a small segment, I'm talking about the general audience. Because, you know, everything is a remake, everything is a prequel, a sequel. It's based off a book that was, you know, like, and they forget that Star Wars was an original film at one point. And they just keep making things over and over. And they don't want to take risks, but they'll spend $200 million on a film rather than making 10 small art films that can do really well. So in a way, they're shooting themselves in the foot because you have to cultivate your audiences, and you're cultivating your audience for one little thing, one taste, and that is blockbusters. So they're not going to have, and it's children and young people, like really young people that you're cultivating this to. Older people aren't going to be going out to watch these movies because there's a whole demographics that's being left out. Like, I want to watch adult films. I enjoy the popcorn films from time to time, but you know. So yeah, those are the things that I think can change in U.S. cinema. Like it's really problematic. It's really I'm trying to get a film funded now, and it's just like, oh, if I was in another country, this wouldn't be as hard as it is. Particularly with the soft power that I built up with the grants and stuff like that. Because one of the things that I've been trying to do over the years is, like, when you get like validation from these institutions like San Francisco Film or Tribeca, Sundance, that's soft power, right? That should be enough. All these institutions have validated you in a certain way. And so there should be enough validation for you to get funding for your next project. But it doesn't work that way, you know? So.
So you mentioned, so first of all, these are all, I think, very, very interesting, very valid points. I think I think it gets obvious while listening to you that there is just so much potential not used in the realm of filmmaking. But you also commented that you are applying right now. So if you want to share, of course, we understand if it's still it's not shareable in a way yet.
Mm-hmm.
But what future projects can we expect from you? What are you working on right now?
I'm working on this film called Ohaji's Past Lives, and it's about a comic book artist who is he's half Black and half South Asian, and he meets a Black woman in a comic book store, and they end up connecting, like Layla and all these people she connects with. Like, they just spend a day with each other, walking around the city, talking and eating, and she invites him back to her spot in Queens. So he stays over, and when he wakes up, he's in Brooklyn, where he lives, with no evidence of this woman ever existing. And so he spends that day running around the city looking for her, and there's no evidence that she's existed. And so it's a science fiction project about past lives, and it got a grant. It also went to Toronto Financial, and we at one point had Logical Pictures in Paris interested, but they got some new leadership and they wanted to focus on European films. So I think we've been put back on the back burner, so we don't know what's happening with that. So it's like we're just doing this dance of like hoping that someone would take a chance on funding a film that can not only be an art house film, but also can be for wider audiences, right? Because it explores, you know, other possibilities, you know. I'm being vague on purpose because I'm really bad at pitching my films. This is a skill that I haven't learned yet. I need to, speaking of closing gaps, I need to close that gap real quick. But it's a film about a man who, in a past life, he was a South Asian woman who was an author who committed suicide. And before that, a dog in Mexico.
So the material for sure sounds very captivating, and you don't have to pitch any further. I think we all will patiently wait for the film to be on the big screen. So from my side, thank you so much for having this conversation with us, for sharing all these insight and background information on the process of making this film, on the characters, on you and your journey as a filmmaker. I'm sure we can, like those who haven't seen the film yet, will probably, hopefully go watch it right away. It's running on Sooner now. So yeah, thank you so much for sharing.
Thank you. I appreciate you taking the time to, out of your vacation, no less, to come and speak to me. So thank you.
Thank you so much.
All right.
So that's about it. Thank you for listening to the Sooner podcast. You can find ÖTE and Malik's film list on the Sooner platform. And apart from that, you'll find a large selection of other films that we have put together for you with great care. Sooner is available in the Android and iOS App Store, on your smart TV, Apple TV, in the web browser, and as a channel on Amazon Prime. If you enjoyed this episode, why not subscribe to our podcast and recommend it to your friends? If you like Sooner, feel free to recommend our streaming service as well. We hope to have you back next time. Goodbye.